one of our local neighbours, was furious with us because he'd just been beaten up by a mafia guy he'd owed money to. And he said to us, Ash, I think I've got my broken arm. I can't go to the hospital, can't work. Where is this God you say is near us? We prayed for Joe. Please ask God to make himself real to you, and he will. And he kind of stormed off. He was in agony. He was in pain. But the next day he came back and he was glowing. And he said, well, in a dream, I met Jesus. And in the dream, Jesus grabbed my right arm and healed my right arm in the dream. And when I woke up, my right arm was healed and I can now work.
Amen. Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbert with Inspired. Great to be back for another fantastic. We've been really looking forward to this one. Basically, if you're new to Inspired, it's all about meeting different mates and contacts of mine from across the globe, doing all sorts of different beautiful stuff, challenging stuff, stirring stuff, and hearing just good news amidst all the crud that we're relentlessly bombarded with on the 24/7 news cycle. You're letting someone else curate all the bad stuff going on in the world to make you feel more depressed or cynical or fearful, and there's so much anxiety out there. So we are counteracting that right now, and I've got no doubt you're going to be super inspired this week because we got with us the wonderful Anji Barker. How are you, Ash?
I'm great, Simon. Thanks for having me here, mate. Really, really pleased to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So Ash and I, we've overlapped at New Wine on doing sort of different main stage and seminar stuff over, I'm guessing, the last 10 years. He is married to Anji. They're very much a team in this. They've done some stunning stuff over many years in Thailand, and now more recently, not that recent, sort of last decade plus, in Birmingham. And he's written a few books. We'll talk about that, and also is the founder of Seedbeds. Now, let's just go way back, Ash. And you're the son of a British migrant raised around about Melbourne. Don't know much more than that. Go for it.
Yeah, so Dad was a carpenter and my mother's name was Mary. So was there any chance they wouldn't have a Messiah complex? But so I don't know if you've seen that show, the 10-Pound Poms, the BBC series has been doing. Well, both my parents were very much in that kind of way. Mum came out with her Scottish family from Tayport, Dundee in the 50s, and my dad came out in the 60s. Anyway, they fell madly in love. Yeah, Australia's a really interesting place in lots of ways. There's a huge lot of British migrant kind of stories. I lived in it was a bit of an enclave, really, of other British migrant families. Dingley Village, they called it. It wasn't a village at all, but there was this kind of hearkening for all things British, and I had a really good childhood. My mum and dad came to faith through a local church, literally the minister kind of knocking on the doors, and they didn't know many people, and they came along to the church, came to faith, and I came to faith as a young child as well. Dingley was a really good place to grow up in, lots of sport, lots of church activities. It was a really healthy environment, but it was, in world terms, a kind of Disneyland, in comparison to the other places I've lived. But when you grow up, you think it's normal. You think everybody is white and everybody has all kinds of privileges that I had. Really, it was Tony Campolo. You listeners might know Tony. It was 1988, Celebrate 88, they called it. It was a big convention that I heard Tony speak at. I was like 18 years old, 17 years old. And I still remember the talk that Toey did. I mean, first of all, he was probably, Celebrate 88 was celebrating 200 years of Australian being colonised by the Brits. So he was the only, I think, speaker of all the world-renowned speakers who actually kind of made the connection. Well, I'm not sure all the Aboriginal people are celebrating 200 years. But he was funny, he was insightful, he had us laughing, crying. But I still remember the call, really, after what Jesus has done for you. Are you willing to go anywhere for the cause of Christ? They put nails through his hands. They put a crown of thorn on his head. After he's done that, will you go anywhere? Probably the places that are easy, other people can do. Why don't you go to the places where you're most needed? For some reason, I thought I'd go to China. I'm not sure why that came to mind, but I stood up most of my friends in my youth group didn't, which was kind of interesting. But I felt really convinced I wanted to make my life count and out of gratitude, really, be willing to spend my life for the cause of Christ. Ange also was at the same meeting, was a really big, it was a bit like New Wine, actually, a big charismatic convention. We met 6 months later, but she'd also been at the same gathering, stood up at the same call. She thought she was going to Haiti. I thought I was going to China. We fell madly in love, got married as 20-year-olds.
Wow.
And then, for the last 35 years, we actually have been trying to live out this call in different ways, shapes and form. But those early years in Dingley with Christian family, British roots, all those things, incredibly formative for me and gave me a platform to go at a whole lot of things in my life.
So next major sort of move, I guess, was relocating to the hyper-diverse Springvale neighbourhood around Melbourne again. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably worth saying, Angie and I both felt called to overseas work, but the advice we got was, well, there's no point going overseas if you've got nothing to offer. Why don't you learn the roots? The world is coming to Australia. Why don't we learn how to do mission work, be missionaries in our own front doorstep? And I got my first ministry role with Youth for Christ. And one of the things Youth for Christ were doing was working in youth detention centres, juvenile prisons. And so I started out there, but there was kind of some funding to try experiment with, can we do some preventative work? And the thing about any kind of prison, prisons aren't a cross-section of society. They're only coming from a few neighbourhoods. And in Australia particularly, the church is by and large absent from the neighbourhoods that are poorest, the neighbourhoods that have hyper-diverse communities. And so one of those neighbourhoods was Springvale. There were about half a dozen other ones that we also had youth clubs and camping programs and mentoring. The image we used in those days was, we felt like once kids are in the prison, it's like kids falling off a cliff and we're trying to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Could we build a fence at the top? And that was what we tried to do in those days. And so going back to those communities, strengthening families, working with churches who wanted to do something, that was kind of our approach. Youth for Christ was such an important, informative time. I got to meet some amazing people in those times. There was a guy called Mick Duncan, who was a New Zealand missionary. He was in a slum in Manila. And I still remember him quoting, Jesus initially, as the Father sent me, so I send you. That rather than missionary work being how do we kind of conquer people and get them to, into our churches, Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so I send you. And this incarnational approach, this willingness to go where people are and invest our lives and share life with people as part of how we do mission was really important. Mick and his family had done that in Manila. One of their children had actually died in that process. And Mick was a really prophetic kind of figure for me. And I still remember this quote that he had from Lao Tzu, which is a Chinese philosopher. He said, go to the people, live with them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they know, build with what they have. But with the best leaders, when the work is done, the task accomplished, the people will say, we've done it ourselves. And I don't want to add with the help of the Lord, but that whole approach of working with what people have in their hands and seeing that potential released, but needing to be up close and personal. So we relocated, not just run youth programs in Springvale. Ange and I moved in, we bought a house in Springvale, and then we moved into the flats. And in those days, Springvale was really a challenging place. Heroin was a really big problem in Australia in the 90s. And we spent over 10 years living there. Well, Youth for Christ, what they wanted to do in those days was, could we disciple young people into the church, which was a great idea, but the churches didn't really want our young people and their families, and the families and young people didn't really want the churches, because none of the folks lived in the neighbourhood anymore. They might have at one point, but white flight had meant that they'd moved out. And so we needed to plant churches and start churches that could be run by local people in that kind of mission, incarnational kind of way. And so the Churches of Christ in Australia, a bit like the Baptists, connected with Alan Hirsch, some people may have heard of. Shaping of Things to Come was his great book, with Mike Frost. So I got to know those guys, and Churches of Christ kind of helped it. Said, look, if we were doing this overseas, we'd be with a mission society. We haven't got a mission society here to join to do this, and to do this kind of work. We can't just do it by ourselves. We need to be part of a missional community, part of a structure that will help us not only plant churches, but for them to belong as well. And for those who are relocating into neighbourhoods like this, there's huge potential for this model to work elsewhere. So Urban Neighbours of Hope was founded in 1993 as part of the Churches of Christ. And it was initially kind of an extension of youth ministries in lots of ways. But once we started planning churches, working with families, raising up local leaders, helping people run their own kind of projects, it became a much more adult kind of work, although we've nearly always had youth and kids programs. I think in those days there was some real lessons to learn. One is that God does miracles. And when you step out in faith, move beyond fear, then all kinds of things are possible. And we saw some amazing miracles. But it was my friend Dave Andrews, he said, look, there's two kinds of miracles. One is we step out in faith, we love people, we have compassion, we care, God's mercy and goodness flow through us, and other people's lives can be changed. And we saw that in remarkable ways, churches planted. Remember one day we were living in our flat right in the kind of the heart of Springvale with lots of heroin kind of problems. And Ange was by the window and could see a young man just collapse on our front nature strip, heroin overdose. She rang the ambulance. Ash, come and get out there, see what you can do. And by the time I got there, he was gone. He was blue. There's no breath. There was no pulse. And I'm trying to work out, do I do the breath of life, all that kind of stuff. But I did pray, and I am a Christian who speaks in tongues, and I did pray in tongues. I'm not sure if it was just so I didn't have to kiss the fella, but anything seemed better than that. But he did come back to life.
Wow.
And he coughed and spluttered and came back to life with me kind of muttering over him. And I didn't quite know what to do. They don't teach you that in Bible college, do they? What to do when someone comes back to life on your front nature strip. But my dad was English, so I invited him up for a cup of tea upstairs. And I said, look, I know there's all kinds of explanations for this, but you were dead and you've come back to life. You've got to make the most of this second chance. He said, look, I've just come out of prison and this batch of heroin is much stronger than I had. I'm not used to it. And we prayed for him. And so those kinds of miracles happened, not all the time, but regularly enough that people came to faith in all kinds of ways. People belonged, people started to believe, and then people's behaviour did change actually over time. Mm-hmm. But you had to be available, you had to be in proximity for those kinds of things to happen. But there was a second kind of miracle, and that is when we open ourselves up to the love of God and be a channel of compassion. People don't change. In fact, sometimes they get worse. And you've just got to try and hang in there with people. And that miracle is that we become different people and they don't change. And certainly have lots of those stories. Probably the most influential in those days was a young man called Metukore. He was a young Pacific Island man. He was probably 12 or 13 when we first met him. But his grandfather said, look, he hasn't been the whole year of high school. Would you take him on? I said, sure, we'll take him on. He's in my small group and he's coming to youth group on a Friday with us. He's welcome to come over after school. He said, no, he hasn't been to school all year. And I mean, take him on like your son. We've already got about 15 people living here. I can't, there's no room. His name literally means no parent, and he does have a mother, but she's back in the islands and she has an intellectual disability. She's not able to look after him, but would you take him on? And so I said, well, I better talk to my wife about that. And I went home to Ange and said, well, what do you think? Should we, could we take him on? I said, well, we've moved into Springvale. If we can't take on a young man called Metakore, no parent. What are we doing here? So he became part of our life. He moved in. He got all the way through year 8, which was remarkable. But then he got a young woman pregnant, and I became a foster grandparent at 23. And he was he was a big part of our life. But there was something that happened. He had a kind of episode, psychiatric episode. He was starting to see faces in trees. He thought his daughter Christine, the little baby, was out to get him, and he got really paranoid. And until he was about 18, his world just kind of collapsed. He started using drugs. We found out he had an intellectual disability as well through the school, but his world kind of just fell apart. He was still really cute, and he was one of those kind of kids who you take him fishing and he'd jump out of the boat and swim under and pull other people's lines as if he was one of the fish. And he would he knew the Gospel of Luke really well. He'd watch the Jesus video over and over and over again, and so he had a faith, very much so, but his afflictions just got the better of him. And when he was 18, the police called and they said Tin Man. He had these plastic bags, and he'd spray this silver paint into the bags and inhale the fumes, and they'd call him Tin Man. So Tin Man, you've got to come. We think he's died. We need you to identify the body. And so and sure enough, it was him. And we did the funeral. It was a big Cook Island funeral. It helped to start a Cook Islander church. And the minister and I kind of shared the service. And the Cook Islands, they do an amazing kind of funerals. They're not like English funerals at all, where you kind of, you have the body closed, you kind of, get through the service and you go out and drink. This is kind of people wail. They open the casket, you kiss the forehead, and you say the things you need to say. And people were wailing. It was really a loud kind of service. And I kissed his forehead too, and I said, mate, this is not what I was hoping for you. I loved you as my own son. But you've changed me. I'm a different person. You've taken me to the edge and to the bottom of the way the world really is. And I'm a different person, and I commit my life to see things like this happen to less people. And that we want to be there. And so that has changed the trajectory of my life. And over those 10 years or so in Springvale, it was experimental, but we found out that God does miracles not only in other people's lives, but in our own hearts as well.
Yeah. I only spent 6 months in Hamburg's red light district, the Reeperbahn, working in the Salvation Army there. And we did see some fruit, but they were hard yards. And often it was 2 steps forward, 300 steps back. And it's easy to get discouraged and want to jack it all in. I assume what helped you not pack it all in?
Yeah, I think other people around us who are holding us, Urban Neighbours of Hope became a kind of missionary order among the poor. And so we had a common rhythm of life. We had mentors. We had a whole kind of support system in place. That was part of it. But to access that, you kind of have to be willing to do it. And just because it's there doesn't mean it works. I think what was really helpful was having some mentors who helped us see the bigger picture and a bigger perspective, and take seriously our pain and suffering, but also put it in a bigger perspective as well. That death and suffering of people is part of what's going on in the world. We live in a really fragile world. And I think those early habits of getting up early, preparing for the day, being still and quiet and asking for God's filling every day has been those kinds of episodes in your life. You kind of go either way, I think. I think you either become really resentful of what's kind of going on, or you find yourself immersed in the mercy and love of God that you need for yourself and can pass it on. And so this is 30 years ago or so, And some of those foundational experiences have kept me in good stead for even tougher things that were to come.
So you end up relocating to serve in Bangkok's largest slum in Thailand, Klong Toey. I've been to Bangkok, I've spoken in Bangkok, but I was in the nicer part of town. This was decidedly not nice, was it?
Yeah, so Ange and I still felt called to overseas work at some, and probably thought we weren't going to do it. Urban Neighbours of Hope took off as a kind of ministry. Churches were being planted, lots of things were happening. But we still had this niggle, really, that we were called to go to some of the world's poorest. We thought it might have been Vietnam. We spoke Vietnamese by this point, or some of it, and we loved the Vietnamese food and culture. We had lots of connections in Vietnam through families who had been relocated in Melbourne. And we went across to Vietnam to have a bit of explore, to see whether maybe this could be for us. And we did love it, but it was hectic. It was very difficult. We had Amy, our daughter, was born by that point. This is about 97. And then we ended up thinking, oh no, will we recommit back to Melbourne? But keep a kind of connection going. But we'll have a sabbatical in 99. And at the last minute, we couldn't get a visa to Vietnam. And so I rang up my friend, Mick Pilbrow, lifelong friends, but he was in Bangkok. He was at the Australian Embassy, basically running the AusAid kind of program in the region. I said, where do you think in the region we could go for a sabbatical? We really can't go to Vietnam now, but we want to serve and live among some of the world's poorest. Have you got any ideas? He said, come to Bangkok. We've got great slums here. You'll love it. And he knew of Klong Toey, so we had a sabbatical living in Klong Toey. To some of 100,000 people in a square mile. Wow. It really is a challenging kind of neighbourhood. It's not, people aren't starving. It's not that kind of slum, but there are real urban kind of issues and challenges and organised crime groups and lots of intensity of people living in really tough conditions. It's obviously Bangkok's really hot, and it's kind of built on an open sewer, really. And so it was a challenging place to live for 3 months. And we didn't think anything more of it other than, look, this approach of incarnational living and starting with what's strong in the local community could work. And we thought all these other people from Urban Neighbours of Hope could come. And then went back to Melbourne. Didn't think anything more of it other than we really loved it. And it was about a year later, I think, I was speaking at a conference in Manila, and I was able to go via Bangkok, and we stayed with some of the families we stayed with on sabbatical. And out of the blue, I just had this deep sense, wow, I was home. This is where we were supposed to be. So we had a bit of a discernment time, and in 2002, in March, we moved to Klong Toey. We didn't own very much at that point, and just bags and our daughter, we went across. And it was tough. I mean, dengue fever 4 times and dysentery and typhoid and typhus and all those kind of things. The language was difficult. Yeah, it was, a couple of times I really did think I was gone. And I think those of us who've had these kinds of experiences, I know you've had similar experiences as well, you do see life differently when you've kind of know how close death can be. And certainly there was a bonding that happened in those first few years with local people, knowing we weren't coming in strength but in weakness. And the Church of Christ had a community centre there that was going to be closed down, and we helped kind of refocus it and repurpose it as a school and for football and for all kinds of things, handicraft business. I think one of the things over the years we have learned that if you try and do like a needs analysis of a Klong Toey slum or any of our neighbourhoods, you could be there for decades just counting the needs. But if you start with what's strong in a local community, you can address what's wrong. One of my neighbours, her name was Poo, P-O-O. She was a brilliant cook and would cook at the front of her house. We all loved her food. I particularly loved it when my mother-in-law, who's Dutch, came over, because the kids would take Omar to Poo and say, we're going to have Poo food for dinner tonight. And Omar said, no, you can't eat Poo. It's too dangerous, and would wind her up. But one day the price of rice went through the roof. They took subsidies. The government took subsidies off rice. People's wages didn't go up, but the price of rice did. And so Pooh didn't put her prices up for a while, and she was losing on every plate. Basically, no one had kitchens, so she was kind of essentially feeding the neighbourhood and felt like she couldn't really put the prices up. But then she'd get into debt. And when you get into debt in a place like Klong Toey, you get into debt to some really dangerous kind of organised crime groups and mafia-type groups. And she was really worried for herself, for her kids. And she said to Ange, look, is there any jobs you can get me, maybe outside the slum, maybe, as a maid or something that would bring some income in quickly? And it is one of those places where prostitution, and it's kind of a harbour of that, and all that kind of work, you can raise money quickly. But Pooh wasn't a young girl, and wasn't even those kinds of options were beyond her. And so it was pretty grim. But and actually the kind of debt she had, you're talking a couple of £100. It's not massive amounts of money to us. And so we could have gone to the bank and taken out of the ATM and handed it to her. But Ange really has that kind of discernment of gifts and talents and passions that people have, and said, well, look, lots of our friends, when they come and visit here, they go to cooking schools and they spend a fortune. And you're much better cook than them. You're much more fun. And lots of people over here, expats, they never meet Thai people. Maybe you could create a really authentic kind of Thai experience and teach people Thai cooking. And Pooh initially was really reticent. She said, look, I can't speak English very well. I don't think people would be interested. But so I had some friends from Australia visit and said, why don't you just try and see how they go? And she took them to the local market. And it's, cockroaches you can eat and frogs with their stomachs cut open, the hearts are still beating and, all these kind of things. And then she'd take them back to her house. And she was just a natural in teaching people how to cook. And within 6 months, became the number one thing to do on TripAdvisor in Bangkok.
Brilliant.
Number two was the Grand Palace. And then she did a cookbook. Of course, the name of the cookbook was Cooking with Pooh. And someone put it in the Frankfurt Book Fair, the biggest book fair in the world, and it won an award for the oddest book title of the year. And suddenly comedians all around the world, Jonathan Ross in this country kind of picked it up. Jamie Oliver, the naked chef, he did a whole show with it. If you look up Jamie Oliver and Cooking with Pooh, you'll see him on YouTube. And he's wearing the apron that says, I cooked with Pooh and I liked it. She sold 50,000 copies of her book. Wow. And it was a transformative experience, not only for her, but for the whole neighbourhood. And if you go to Klong Toey today, cooking school's still going on 20 years later. It's had all the ups and downs of COVID, ruining the tourist industry. She's come back. When we moved out of Bangkok, actually, and moved to the UK, about 6 months later, that part of the slum burnt down, including her cooking school. She rebuilt. None of those things would be possible if we just gave her £200 to pay back her debts.
That's right.
And so I just think it is amazing if you can release people's talents, if you can join people together. Actually, one of my books was out of my PhD research, and you need all the help you can get to sell a book of your PhD research. So we went to the Foreign Correspondence Press Club, and we invited Pooh to come with us. And we actually had a packed house. We had lots of people from the slum there. We had lots of press there. But the first question went to Pooh. It was, if you're so successful with your cooking school and with your book, why do you continue to live in Klong Toey if you don't need to? Actually, it was a really insightful question from one of the journalists. In church growth terms, we talk about redemption and lift. When people get rid of personal sins, they're expensive, you have better connections, you start learning and building your capacity. Often people get up and go and leave the very communities they were from. Pooh's response was interesting. She said, look, I'm not as wealthy as you might think. We've set up this foundation, so the money kind of goes through that, and that means that we can help train and employ young people, and when they're ready, they can then start their own small businesses. So I think she'd started about 50 small businesses coming out of young people that she'd employed. But she said, look, I used to have to work from 5 in the morning till 9 at night. And if I had a day off, we would get behind and we would lose money. I could never have a day off. I could never have holidays. Now I can have holidays. Now I can have days off. This is a gift from God to me. And I want other people to have the same opportunities that I've had. And so 12 years in Klong Toey was amazing. We learned so much from it. At the end, though, I got really sick. I nearly died again. And as you're getting older, it felt a bit harder. As I did my PhD research on the rise of slums and that kind of urban incarnational kind of approaches to change. And I think my son was getting on. My daughter had gone back to Australia to finish her studies. My son was about to start high school. And so there was a few things. I mean, a lot of organizational leaders, once they're kind of in place, you can never get rid of them. And we had a next generation that would kind of been with us, some of us, for that whole 20-year journey. And they wanted to go a different direction that I wanted to go. I wanted to expand, but the next level actually wanted to consolidate. And so, yeah, you have some choices. And I felt to let go rather than try and push the young ones out. But that meant, what do you do? And as we prayed, we kind of wondered about what was next. And we ended up coming to Birmingham in the UK.
Right. Well, just before we move on to Birmingham chapter, I know you've talked about sort of demonic stuff and the supernatural and witchcrafty, whatever animistic stuff was going on. Can you share some of those stories? Because it's so alien to a largely Western audience, the power of Jesus.
Yeah, so there were a couple of times in our church meeting where there were real manifestations and voices and all those kinds of things were part of life. And yes, we prayed in Jesus' name, and change happened. It was interesting. So Thailand is known as quite a resistant place. It is technically Buddhist, but actually there's kind of an animistic, spiritist kind of worldview. So people are very scared of ghosts. People are very scared of demons. You will see people getting in trances and putting skewers through their faces. All those kind of things are very, very real. The spirit world is very real for people. And actually, sharing faith is really difficult. John 3:16 in perfect Thai doesn't make any sense to the average Thai person. The word for God is plajao. But if you hear the word on the street, you would think you're talking about the king of Thailand. God so loved, or love is dukkha, love is an attachment, love is a desire. And in our local worldview, you want to get rid of desire. You don't want to follow through on it. God so loved the world. Well, the world's an illusion. So you've got a king, dukkha causes suffering. So you've got a king causing suffering in an illusionary world and then murders his own son. And then, of course, eternal life, living forever when you believe in karmic kind of cycle, just isn't good news. And so even though we could speak Thai and say the right words, what people understood was really difficult. And so what we found we had to do was really say Jesus isn't far away from any one of us. And Jesus is a living person. Jesus is alive. And ask God to make himself real to you, and Jesus will make himself real to you. Now, you take some risk when you say things like that. And one day, Joe, one of our local neighbours, was furious with us because he'd just been beaten up by a mafia guy he'd owed money to. And he said to us, Ash, I think I've got my broken arm. I can't go to the hospital because I've absconded from the Navy. It's my right arm. I can't work. Where is this God you say is near us? We got his wife off the hospital. She was able to go to the hospital. She was pregnant. But he was in real agony and wasn't able to work as a motorbike taxi driver because he couldn't use his right arm for the accelerator. And so he said to Joe, we prayed for Joe, please ask God to make himself real to you, and he will. And he kind of stormed off. He was in agony. He was in pain. But the next day he came back and he was glowing. I said, Joe, what's happened, mate? What's gone on? And he said, well, I was furious and swearing at you guys as I left, but I did, before I kind of passed out on my bed, ask God to make himself real to me. And in a dream, I met Jesus. And in the dream, Jesus grabbed my right arm and healed my right arm in the dream. And when I woke up, my right arm was healed. and I can now work. And was suddenly interested in Jesus, and became a worship leader for us. And he was amazing, a really important part of our little house church that got going. And so that was not dreams were not uncommon for our folk. It was almost like the rational kind of mind had to be asleep, and that Jesus would reach people in those kinds of ways. I know that's happening for a lot of Persian Muslim folk who are coming to faith through dreams, and I think there is something around power encounters, something about people experiencing God. Even though the rational mind can't work it all out. I think that's true also over here in the West now. The rational mind is so tight and so dismissive, but then things happen in our lives that open us up, and those kind of opportunities are really important to grasp.
Any more stories you want to share from Klong Toey?
I mean, the community centre was a real joy to work from and be based from. And we helped start a handicraft business that employed, I think in the end, about 80 women who would have been involved in prostitution and would have had to leave their families to do it, but could work from home. And Klong Toey Handicrafts, I think, sold like £250,000 worth of goods all around the world. And I think that kind of capacity building for people was a really crucial part of it. And it was interesting how our house churches got going as well. That was a big part of life, and people coming for meals and trying to do some traditional Thai type experiences rather than the big Western churches that were there. But it was a beautiful part of our life. My kids kind of grew up there. It was a challenge for them, being the only white kids in a slum community like that. And certainly that they saw some things I wish they didn't see in terms of violence and guns and everything else. But it was, it was a remarkable place to live and serve. And when we were back there earlier this year, and to see those families, a kind of bond happens, I think, in these kind of circumstances that never leave.
Yeah. I was blown away, Ash, when you talked about the numbers involved in slum living. Give us a quick stats blast.
Yeah, there's well over 1 billion people living in slums at the moment, and it is growing by 100,000 new people a day. Nice. Now, there have been some in the last few years, particularly in China. There've been some developments, but basically the world's coming to cities, and cities are not prepared for them. And that will happen in the UK more and more, but it's happening particularly in the developing world, particularly in Asia and Africa. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bangkok, it's over 20 million people, and that could be 30 million people within 5 or 6 years. And Bangkok already is not able to cope with that. Yeah, so that's a worldwide phenomenon. You probably know that 75% of the world will be living in cities by the middle of the century, and that 1 in 3 urban dwellers that currently live in slums. So these are huge numbers. They're a huge part of the world. Slums have become normal, and we need Christians willing to go and relocate and be part of bringing change from within. And so, I'm really committed to slum transformation. We don't just want slum and squatter neighbourhoods. We just want really good neighbourhoods in the end.
Yeah. From our slum slums everywhere, aren't there, in these third world countries, developing countries. But there was this story I tell, which I find very challenging, of the little boy in the slum in the ghetto. He's being teased by one of his other little buddy street kids, and that guy was saying, if God loves you, why doesn't he take care of you? Why doesn't God tell someone to bring you shoes and a coat and better food? And the little lad thought for a moment, and then with tears starting in his eyes, he said, I guess he does tell somebody, but somebody forgets.
Yes.
And I guess what I love about you guys is that repeatedly, well, you're saying, it's in the poorest places that there's the least gospel presence. And as there's that sort of economic uplift that when people do better, they move out of those bad areas. Yet you have, with Anji and your kids incarnating it, chosen to go into the roughest places. I just think that's really beautiful. And yeah, we need more such people to say, here I am, send me. That's a tough call, but I know you've got no regrets, have you?
No, I mean, the regrets aren't about the call. The regrets probably we got obsessed about different things, and we were fanatical in lots of ways. And I think if the kids, it wasn't where we lived, but at times, yeah, we were so preoccupied by what was going on. I have regrets about that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey folks, as you listen to this, I'll be halfway up a mountain in Burundi on a bike, slogging my guts out with a very sore backside in the blistering heat with 15 other people. We're doing 700 kilometers this week, 38,000 feet of elevation up and down the mountains to raise money for our critical work here in what is still the hungriest country in the world, the second poorest right now. It is so desperately needed. The poverty is extreme. So it'd be a great encouragement if you wanted to sponsor us. Money goes such a long way out here. You can go to greatlakesoutreach.org/bike. And the link will be in the show notes. Or maybe you want to join us next year. It's pretty much guaranteed to be the first week of June. Each year we've done that. It's the 10th tour this year. So you can do that same link. That's greatlakesoutreach.org/bike if you want to sponsor us or sign up for next year's tour. All right. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the podcast.
Your current chapter, you've written this book, No Wastelands, How to Grow Seed Beds of Shalom in Your Neighbourhood. You're now in a less glamorous part of Birmingham, shall we say, and tell us about the seed bed story.
Yeah, I think as we're finishing up in Thailand, I was 45, what do you want to do for the next 20, 30 years? And I really wanted to invest in local community leaders. I really felt like it's great for relocators like ourselves to go and do things, but to see things long term, it's the releasing the potential of local community leaders that really mattered. And I wanted to invest in those kinds of opportunities for people who don't get these kinds of capacity building chances. So I was trying to explain this to John Perkins, who was one of my heroes. He was a civil rights leader in America, started the Christian Community Development Association in the States, wrote a number of books, Let Justice Roll Down. We were at a conference together, we were helping run in Kuala Lumpur, and he was kind of like, why are you going to Birmingham? That's such an odd choice for an Australian who's been living in Thailand. And I tried to explain this, this sense where you needed somewhere to be a base that would, people come and see and learn, but really invest in local community leaders. And he said, I know what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is grow a seed bed. People will come and learn and grow, and the nutrients and what you feed them and the water will help them grow in places that growth normally doesn't happen. And then some will stay, but others will be replanted in other places. There will be a rootedness, but also a connectedness all around the world because of your seedbed. And I did feel like it was a kind of prophecy for us. But basically, we had all kinds of plans for Winson Green. The Churches of Christ had a theological college. They wanted a centre for urban ministry. I'd love to do that. That could be a way to do it. We're taking over one of the failing government schools. There's going to be a documentary series about the street that it's on. The street was called James Turner Street, and the documentary series was Benefit Street. Some of people may have seen that documentary. Yeah. The Church of England had a vicarage it hadn't used for years that it kind of offered us. And so we could kind of see how lots of things could work. And none of our plans survived impact. It is, well, you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. And certainly that was the case. Within the first year here, none of those things had really worked. The theological college had a change of heart. It didn't want to do Centre for Urban Ministry in Winson Green anymore. We'd raise money, all kinds of things. So I got a job at the local prison here, which is kind of part of Winson Green. Working for Yellow Ribbon and kind of chaplaincy and helping people on their way out to relocate back into communities, and met some amazing people. Ange did great at trying to hang in there with being based in a primary school, but it was one of those cases where, trying to get parents in the school was not something the school really wanted. we ended up getting the vicarage, and one of my favourite missiologists of all time is Leslie Newbigin. He's one of my favourite writers. He wrote Gospel and Pluralist Society, Foolishness to the Greeks, Open Secret, and he wrote those books while he was here in Winson Green. And so we thought we really want to build with what's strong, and it doesn't get stronger than Leslie Newbigin for me. And so we found, through Steve Chalk, actually, a contact, and were able to meet John Newbigin, Leslie's son. And when we were able to take over the vicarage, we renamed it Newbigin House. The Bishop of Birmingham came, John Newbigin came. John actually said, look, my dad didn't really want to go to Winson Green. He'd finished at a college, and they were going to close down this URC church, United Reformed Church. And but my dad said, look, the church can't withdraw from the inner city. I'll go myself if I need to. Yeah. And they said, well, go. It became his most rich writing life as he reflected on the gospel and culture in the West. And there's very few of those books he wrote in that time that didn't reference Winson Green. And we started a charity called Newbigin Community Trust. And over time, more and more of that asset-based approach, working with the gifts and talents of local people, became more and more released. And Newbigin Community Trust now has 30 local staff from 4 sites. We've helped start 2 new congregations. And a big part of our work with Seedbeds is training local leaders. And lots of them have come and worked with us and then gone to other places. We're working now in Myanmar and Australia and Thailand and Ukraine. And so it has been an amazing experience. The last few years, we've taken over this old United Reformed Church building that would probably fit 1,000 people in it. And it was derelict. The little congregation were trying to hang on, but the place was falling down around their ears. And with local community help, have been able to resurrect it. I don't know if you can hear some of the background noise, but we've got roller skating, the holy rollers, we call them, in one of the halls that we've recovered. And Seedbeds is based here. And we've been able to particularly train local community leaders through our Changemakers program. Local communities nominate people to come onto the program. We incubate their ideas and them in their own faith and their own journeys. And they pitch their idea. It's not quite Dragon's Den, but they pitch their ideas to a resource panel at the end, and they can get some cash or coaching or connections to be able to start their mission project. We're also doing that for pioneers, of people like ourselves who are in a neighbourhood who are Christians. Not all people who do Changemakers start off as Christians. Many do in their journey as well. And so, so pioneers is a really big part. The United Reformed Church has been brilliant in basically saying, look, we haven't planted many churches. We're very good at closing down churches over the years, but we haven't been so good at opening new ones up. And our Pioneers program is in our 3rd cohort now. And we've helped to start 5 or 6 congregations now with local people in their communities, often with existing churches that kind of get a replant within them. The existing congregation can meet as long as they like, but or some of them have stopped meeting. But rather than sell the building off to the highest bidder, there's a chance for the local community to repurpose and start a new congregation within it. So, that's been a big part of our life over the last 10 years.
10 beautiful, challenging, but fruitful years. I was reading the long list of statistics of this lovely gospel kingdom fruit, and statistics tell one-liner story, but just give us a few sort of personal sort of anecdotes of the success stories of people, the poster child of who's benefited from Seedbeds.
One of our first Changemakers, so Seedbeds is the organisation, Changemakers is one of the programs. One of my favourites is Jay, who I met in Winson Green Prison, actually. He came to the chapel service. He came to faith actually through Tim Hughes. Some people might know Tim and Gas Street Church, but he was back inside. We helped him with the resettlement, but he was really vulnerable as he came out. And what Changemakers did, I still remember actually him coming to one of our first sessions. Tim Evans, who's a good mate of mine, and we run this together. He said, Ash, I'm not sure Jay's really ready for this. Other local leaders had been nominated on the program. Some of them were running charities and about to start social enterprises, and Jay was really struggling to stay awake, actually. But I really felt he was right, and that we could carry him, and he could get involved. One of the things we do is help people tell their story. So they do a timeline of their stories, and Jay's story was, really challenging, wave after wave of awful things that had kind of happened to him, and he was pretty, upset actually sharing his story. But then we did Strength Finders. I don't know if you know Strength Finders. You look at what's strong that you have. When he found out like he was 1 in 10 million people, and his particular strengths were really clear to him, he went to bed, woke up the next morning, and he was just alive. And I said, Jay, what's happened? He said, well, I go to sleep normally thinking about all the things that's wrong with me. But last night I had the best sleep ever because we'd just spent 3 hours talking about what was strong with me. And Jay had just never turned back. He started a small business, a charity. He went to business school. He now speaks in jails and prisons and schools and to the government as an advocate. And he's still a really important part of Gas Street Church as well. Yeah, I love seeing Jay's flying the way he is. I also love, closer to home here, and so he moved out of Winston Green, and so he is someone who has been one of those replants, as it were, someone who comes and learns and grows and then is replanted. But we've also got others who have stayed and have used their gifts and talents. Thinking Baz and Alex, who we went on a bike ride just now down the canals, and their vision and their change maker pitch was to take over a bit of the church here that had been derelict. It had 50 years of rubbish, old hymn books and overhead projectors that didn't work and all kinds of things, a big storeroom. And could they make it for music and art? Because Baz was a musician and Alex was an artist. And he said both of them kind of Rastafarian background guys, and really in the middle of this really met Jesus and wanted to use their talents and gifts for the local community. And I love seeing those guys. They're just so alive to each other, to God, to this place. And the word shalom is one of my favorite Bible words. It's a Hebrew word, and it literally means peace, but it's deeper than that. It's about God, people, and place living in harmony together. And I think that's what those experiences have, that it isn't just individuals and God, it's a local community, it's a local place, and that God is present, animating and releasing his love and mercy and goodness through us. And the church that got planted here in Lodge Road Church is on the weekend, about 50 of us, which is not a big church by any stretch, but we're all local people, and we see people most days here. And there's a real participation, there's a real openness to the Word of God, and a willingness for their gifts and talents to be released.
Wonderful. Anji, obviously not with us. If what would be Anji's sort of favourite story to tell? Could you tell that?
Angie's always on the latest things that have just happened. So one of the things that she's been working on at the moment is helping get facilities for local people. So, the new parish guys talk about a place is a big enough area to live a lot of life in, but small enough to become a known character, the unfolding drama of the place. And so we got alpacas. Ange was really adamant, but alpacas are going to help us meet the neighbourhood. And so they would live in our backyard, and we'd walk them like dogs, on leads around the corner till we got to the local primary school, and they would stay in the field opposite the school during the day. The kids would have, kind of outdoor lessons with them. They were fantastic. And we did become known characters. Unfortunately, one of them escaped one day, and they went down the road right up to the main high street. People were chasing them. They had police sirens kind of after them, and Angie's kind of chasing after them, trying to get hold of them. Eventually came past one of the pubs, and one of the guys, who was quite drunk, just stood out and grabbed the the alpaca by the neck and caught it. Someone videoed the whole thing and hashtagged it llama drama, and apparently we had 1 million views on TikTok. Sometimes you want to become a known character in the unfolding drama of the place, but sometimes you get known for not the things you want to be known by.
Classic. Love that.
Hi, my name is Julia and I live near Winchester in England. I love this podcast. I listen to it whilst cooking and doing the laundry, and it transforms a very mundane task into a precious time that is life-giving and faith-building. Listening to the interviews often feels like putting a grain of sand in an oyster. It gives me this itch and dissatisfaction with living a safe, conventional life that's driven by the world's values. And it makes me hungry for adventures of faith and for my life to be fully shaped and led and filled by the Spirit, to not miss out on using my life for God's glory. And like the sand in the oyster, I pray and hope that God will use these powerful testimonies to produce many pearls.
The other thing we've been able to do, one of my highlights here, is I think I became really committed to place making. And so we're able to save a local park. We're able to get rezoning of a derelict piece of land for a new school. We had no high school here, and there was a £26 million project. So that school got started, Windsor Academy, have been brilliant, and they worked with us to help design the school so it can be used after hours on weekends, as well as having really committed staff who a lot of them are local. One of our guys, John, that used to live with us at New Beacon House, has helped start an eco field as part of the school, and they're looking at a forest school as well. Housing is one of the big challenges, and we've been working with the Church of England and others to get affordable, secure housing. In Birmingham, there's over 25,000 people who are in insecure housing. In Sandwell, which is the next council that's kind of right on the border with us, they have 20,000 people in insecure housing. Wow. And so we can do all this great kind of community building work, but if people don't have a secure home, it's really difficult for that to be sustained. So I think over the next few years, how can we build models of secure homes, and what role can the church play in helping resolve the housing crisis is a really critical point. But my favourite Leslie Newbigin quote is that the role of the local church is to be a sign, a foretaste, and an instrument of God's coming reign in a place for which it is responsible. He was really quite dismissive of what he called churches of association, churches that only met once a week. That's the only time they were together. He was much more interested in not so much flourishing congregations, all that's important, but flourishing places. And I think what the role of the church can do, in a church like ours, we can be a sign, we can be a foretaste, we can be an instrument of God's coming reign in this place, and God's will being done on earth as in heaven in this place is what we're after. Man. And that's what we want to invest the next few years of our life for. The Celts have a great saying. They talk about a resurrection place. In the Celtic missionaries in the Dark Ages, they would go out on coracles, little boats, and ask the God to blow them to their resurrection place, and that they would invest in that place, and that they would die in that place. And when Jesus returns, they will be resurrected in that place and see all the fruit of God's work and their labour. I hope that Winson Green is my resurrection place, that when Jesus comes and returns and I rise from the dead, I'll rise up in Black Patch Park and I'll see all the things we haven't quite been able to manage while I'm alive. But faith, hope, and love remains, and the greatest of these is love, and that lives on.
Oh, mate. Oh, you're preaching there. I was going to say what your last words, but those were your last words. And I love that concept of being a sign, an instrument, and a foretaste of the kingdom of God. Yeah, well, Ash Barker and Anji and all your team, we just pray God's blessing. Guys, I'm going to put various details in the blurb, so do check it out if you want to support their ministry. That's not why Ash is on this, but that'd be an absolute lovely win-win bonus. If you wanted to check out more of that, you can be in touch with him. And so, Ash, brother, keep up the great work. We're cheering you on. God bless you.
Bless you, mate. Thank you for the opportunity to share, and hope I didn't rattle on too badly.
No, brilliant stuff. I'm inspired. I'm encouraged. I hope you are too, guys. If you are, can you give us a great review on Spotify, iTunes? Can you share this podcast with your mates? Gossip a bit further. And I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing. Might send him in for the mixing. Next week, another fantastic guest from a very different life journey. But I love the variety we get on this. Anyway, you guys have a great week. God bless you, and toodaloo.